All right, the moment a lot of you have been waiting for, the vintage air install. I'll be honest, I'm procrastinating. I've done everything around this shop this morning that I possibly could. I've swept the floor, I've cleaned up. I'm dreading pulling the dash out. I really truly am. I've said this before, I'll say it again. I got a lot of time invested in making that dash new again. I restored it a few years ago and it went back in really nicely, and it's not scratched, it's not dinged, it's not whatever. And it's got to come out. Anyway, before I get into that, I thought I'd just give everybody a brief little update as to what's gone on since the last video. Where we last left off, I was about 3/4 of the way through an electric fan install, and I decided I was going to start pulling some of the accessories and brackets off the front end of this motor, the power steering pump and its associated brackets, to get ready to put the air conditioning brackets that I safely saved somewhere, however cannot find anymore, on the motor. Now, I've spent the last couple of days scrambling and asking anyone and everyone that I can think of if they have those brackets, and a buddy out in Massachusetts, Robert, goes by Work Equipment on Instagram. He pulled through and sent a set of brackets that he had laying around up to me. And he quickly realized, I talk about this a lot, but I don't know how many of you believe me. He quickly realized just how expensive it is to send something to Canada. And in this case, it's old bracketry, you know what I mean? It's worth whatever, say a value of $5. I don't even want to tell you how much I had to spend to bring that stuff up here. It is absolutely ridiculous. Put it this way, I could have bought 3 of the brand new remanufactured brackets from LMR. The only reason I've gone this route with Robert is LMR is out of stock until like November, but I could have bought 3 sets of those brackets and the hardware for the price that I paid to get these used brackets from my good buddy Robert. Anyway, we'll leave that one there. My rear end's still a little sore. So that's where we left off. Since then, I've pulled the rad, and just because I wanted a lot of room to work with here, hey? So it's laying over there. I got the fans loosely attached to it. We got to obviously mount all kinds of things from this vintage air kit up and in this area. I have a feeling at some point during this video, the upper intake may come off, cold air intake, that type of stuff, but we'll see about that. The biggest scenario that we do need to tackle, and I mentioned it before, is my dash. All of this is coming out, and this really pains me, but it's part of the process. Now, before we get into anything crazier and start pulling interior and whatnot, I thought I'd just have a quick run through these boxes with you guys, because I've only opened up the condenser box, and I mean, just for what it's worth, this box alone has got a lot of moving parts in it, right? So I can only imagine what's behind us here, but I'm hoping it's not crazy. That's obviously going to be the heater box. But anyway, let's crack these open, see what's all involved in this kit, and then we can get after dismantling my car. All right, let's see what we got. Okay. Away. Hoses, mounting brackets, yay, wiring, looming, and oh god, hose clamps. We got lines, we got, oh, actually, you know what? I've been meaning to find this, because the one component of this whole scenario that I'm not like 1,000% sure of is this control panel. I'm kind of old school when it comes to the heater control panel, right? And yeah, this is the new age, well, digital one, right? And actually it's, well, it's got nice little detents, like every little 1/8 inch you kind of got a little detents. That's kind of neat. I don't know, maybe I can warm up to it, but I'm just, yeah, not like crazy about the, you know, what the original one looks like, right? So I'm crazy about the original one. I'm not so crazy about going away from this. Or from that, pardon me. So here, let's give you the full effect. It's kind of neat that they send you one of these. I don't need one, but these trim panels 9 times out of 10 are busted. So there's the new look. Maybe I'll have to reserve my thoughts for once it's in the car. More on that later. Good grief, folks. Well, the heater box is down in here. And yeah, there is a lot of stuff in here. Well, maybe it's not as bad as it looks. It's just there's a lot of foam in the bottom of the box, but I would like to pull this box out for you just to give you a sense of the overall size difference from the Foxbox heater box, right? Like, this is a hell of a lot smaller. And 2024 tech, you know? So I'm hoping it's probably like a quieter blower motor and all that good stuff. Anyway, I think instead of tearing all of this stuff out of here, well, that's pretty much it actually. Some brackets, some hoses. There's more hoses. There's hoses you don't want to bend. Okay, so there's the big boy. Okay, now the condenser I kind of showed already. But there's all kinds of stuff in here too. So looks like they give you a mount for the dryer. I don't know where the dryer is actually. Okay, here's some mounts for the compressor. There's your low pressure switch, more hoses, more looming, another mount. Goodness. Lots of loose hardware. That always makes me a little anxious when you're getting into one of these projects. Okay. Now, if I was a betting man, I'd say this is our compressor. Box inside of a box. And this is another neat little deal here, in that the compressor is way smaller than a stock compressor. Check out that cute little guy. Right? Single wire. So yeah, that's kind of neat versus the old monster that everybody's used to. Okay, and then this guy's light. What do we got here? And a hose, great big hose. Okay. Well, that's the least intimidating box out of all of them.
Well, that looks daunting, but I guess it's like eating an elephant, right? One bite at a time. So that's what we're going to do. I have not been able to find an all-inclusive set of instructions from Vintage Air yet. It seems like each one of these boxes is a component in the grand scheme of having air conditioning in your car. So I guess it's start wherever you want. So with that being said, I think I'm going to start at the front end of my car and work in. That way I can avoid pulling this dash for as long as possible. And I guess I should mention too that yeah, like I've never done one of these, right? I'm literally going to be following instructions, and I'll be mentioning things as I go. But yeah, I guess this is just more of a way for you guys to see if this is a road you want to run down, and either flip your car over from OEAC, or take a car that didn't come with AC and make it have AC. I guess I should mention that too as well, right? This is a non-AC car. Came from Ford without AC. So we are going to a car that now has AC with the Vintage Air kit. So, wish me luck. Let's get after this. All right, guys, so how do I want to sum this up for you? The condenser is ready to go in the car, condenser and dryer. Okay, so you've seen the time lapse. The instructions take maybe a little getting used to. I had a few little minor hang-ups. So the instructions refer to a binary switch, okay, which is a two-way switch, which would be the switch that you would use if you had a mechanical fan or a clutch fan in your car. If you have an electric fan, you use a trinary switch. And not to get too deep into the weeds, but the trinary switch essentially has an extra circuit that kicks the electric fans on when your air conditioning compressor kicks in, okay? So the instructions only talk about the binary switch. And as you've seen from the unboxing, there's a lot of parts, right? So I put the binary switch in. And I'm like, what's this switch over here for? Oh, there's the trinary switch. Well, which one do they want me to use? And like, so anyway, you gotta, I guess I mention all that just to say, like, you kind of got to read between the lines and know your situation. Okay, like, this is nothing against Vintage Air. They were kind enough to give you both options, given the fact that you might be running electric fans, which I am going to be, right? So anyway, that's one thing to be aware of. Two is, I, for whatever reason, just had like what seemed to be a bit of a bent bracket for my dryer. I'll show you here. So this, I don't even know what kind of shape you want to call it. It's kind of an L-shaped bracket, right, that holds the dryer. Well, it, for whatever reason, was just bent over this way, which really had me scratching my head because all of these lines are pre-bent and nothing was lining up. I'm like, did I get the wrong part? Like, what was the deal? So anyway, who knows, right? Maybe this was something in transport. It just got a little jacked up and led me down this road of, well, trying to figure out just what the hell was going on. And I guess as long as you don't throw your hands in the air and give up, as the steps progress, you know, things start making sense as to which direction this dryer needs to face, because, you know, it's in like a round clamp style bracket. So I didn't know if it had to face this way, cockeyed, you know, like all over the place. So anyway, I guess what I'm saying here is a lot of the time that this took me was just like test fitting, trying, and farting around with it a little bit. But just to forewarn you, I guess, right? It all does work the way it's intended to. You just might have to do some finagling with your kit a little bit because, like I say, maybe due to transport or whatever, something got a little tweaked. It is, however, all put together in the fashion that the instructions tell me to. And the next step is dropping this in the car. Okay, condenser and dryer are in. And in true Vintage Air format, they use the OEM holes. So very, very slick. I didn't have the little speed clips up here on my car for whatever reason. It just had the bottom ones. Well, this is a non-AC car, so it's probably why it didn't have them on top, or maybe I took them apart or took them off at one point in time. I don't know. But anyway, they do supply you with the speed clips and the 1/4-inch bolts, so yeah, it all fits in there real slick. Their bracket to kind of secure your lines to the frame rail works real good. Here's the trinary switch wiring. I'm going to go through and wire this up real quickly because this is going to talk to my fans, and I've still got my wheel well liner out, so I'm going to run that stuff in and around in front of the or down below, whatever, and over to my relays, because this trinary switch will ground out my relay, which will in turn turn my fans on. So now I have 3 ways of these fans turning on. Whether my AC kicks on, I manually turn them on my switch, or my temp sensor tells the fans to come on. So 3 different switching mechanisms for these electric fans. And yeah, I'm trying to figure out if I want to come through the wheel well liner this way and up into the cab, because one of these wires is going to tie back into the controller, like the HVAC controller. But anyway, I'll wire this stuff up here, guys. I'll give you a picture of the instructions as to how to wire this up. Pretty slick little deal that they give you, right, to show you how it all works. Okay, folks, quick little side note, not really anything to do with the install of a vintage air conditioning kit, but this is just in particular to my scenario. My rad no longer fits. So, well, I guess maybe this is somewhat relevant if you already have a great big 4-core wide rad. You're going to start running into clearance issues here with how the AC lines come through the rad support. So here you can see I'm like over as far as I can go this way, and on this side I'm hitting the lines. So that sucks, especially after all the time I took getting the bloody fans set up on there and everything else. But well, I don't know, maybe another example of the rabbit hole, right? You go down the road of trying to make things better, and in some regards you do, and in some regards you don't. You end up costing yourselves more money. Right. Holy. Well, folks, I don't know if you'll be able to tell from my time lapse or not, but I was going to try and do the frame and the dash all in one, and you know, not that it can't be done. I got a lot going on behind this dash between my air ride gauges and whatever else. So I kind of went at it with just going to pull the frame, and then I went, you know what, to hell with it. I'm going to cause more grief than it's worth. Let's do the skin, and then we'll do the frame after. So she's out. Yeah, I guess as far as like pieces of advice go, take your time, okay? Like, all this stuff does come out somewhat easily, air quotes. You know, keep yourself organized. That's key, especially when it comes to all these various screws. You know, if you're doing this for your very first time and you don't recognize these screws from the myriads of other times you've had dashes out of these cars, just put your screws back in place, right? As you're coming out, put them back in. I'm going to pull the frame out because the last time that this frame was out, I went to great lengths to try and tuck my harness all back in where it's supposed to go and everything, which I will be doing again. God, is it homely when that dash comes out back here, hey? Doesn't matter how clean your interior is, unless you've spent some time behind the dash cleaning things up, it's just nasty. And these frames always look like they've lived on the ocean.
It's out, folks. Man, the real estate that a heater box takes up is absolutely astonishing. Like, look at that. And what's even more astonishing is when you put it beside the vintage air kit. Like, check this rig out. I mean, without too much exaggeration, I would say it's probably half, if not less, of the overall size. Like, isn't that wild? Crazy. And whatever, you know, like, technology's changed, and this thing served its purpose for sure. An interesting little side note tidbit for you. This is still the original heater core from 1992. I never, ever, ever had an issue with it.
Okay, guys, well, we're back from tidying, at least as much tidying as I want to do prior to having the frame back in here. Once the frame's in, I'll probably do a little bit more doctoring, but there was some vintage wiring that I had done, you know, years ago, stereo related stuff, and some of the stuff for the air ride. I mean, when you're putting that stuff in and the dash is in, you know, you're kind of just doing what you can reach. And now once all this is out, it made it a little easier for me to clean up and put things where I actually want them to live. So that is done for now. Going back to the install at hand, reading ahead here, it looks like I've got to cut my firewall insulation, which breaks my heart because, as you can see, this stuff's in very, very good shape. But I am committed, right? Obviously, the dash is out, so we got to move forward with a little bit of a cut here, or a trim. I'll bring you along for the ride. I think what we're going to be doing here in the steps moving forward is there's some plates in which need to be mounted to the firewall so we can mount the new box and run all the lines through and everything. I do know for a fact that we're going to be blocking off this inlet, the air inlet. This vintage air kit does not suck air from the outside. It only circulates air from inside the cab, both from a heating and cooling perspective. Give you a quick look at what's going on and explain a few things. So, first and foremost, I mentioned that we were going to have to cut this insulation. I don't know if we officially have to, but I'm really holding out on that step in the instructions in the hopes that I don't have to. I want to leave this OEM firewall blanket intact if I can. And so far, it looks like I can. I've read through ahead into the instructions, and I can't see any reason as to why a person would need to cut this. Sure, it'd give you more room to work with while you're doing the current steps I just did, but I think it's easy enough to leave it in there if you've got a good one and don't bother cutting it out. But more on that, I guess, as we progress. I have drilled these top two holes here and here. These holes you reference through this plate that Vintage Air gives you. You kind of drop it in place here. In my case, right, I stuck it behind the insulation blanket here. And you use these bottom two holes as reference with these bottom two holes to find out where you need to drill those top two. These holes are those studs that come off the back of your heater box and allow you to mount your dryer, your OEM dryer, to the firewall side of the engine side of the firewall. So that has occurred, and just, I guess, as pieces of advice, you know, put that up there and move it around and get it exactly where you want it. Use it as reference while you're drilling holes, because you definitely don't want to screw holes up that are going through and into your firewall. Just measure 10 times, cut once. We've also mounted this fresh air cap that Vintage Air provides a person with. Now these holes that mount this thing to the cowl are not there from the factory. You have to drill those. So again, measure 10 times and just drill once, because this thing, I mean, it is somewhat of a precision cut piece. You know, if you're too far one way or the other way, you're not going to get a good seal. Make sure you have it where you want it. So further to that, this isn't in the instructions, but I did put a piece of kill mat on the back side of that. I just saw it as a nice way to try to like clean up some of the gap that's going to occur between the cowl and this plate. And then I also RTV'd on top of that kill mat just to really seal it up, really quiet this area down. And then once I was all in, you know, my RTV kind of squashes out, and I took a little bit more on my finger and pretty much just ran it like a seam sealer. You want to make sure that you're never ever going to have a possibility of water coming through there. I know a lot of us don't drive our cars in the rain if we can, but if you get caught, the last thing you need is your heater box getting soaked and your wife getting wet feet. I figure this is as good a time as any to fill you in on what's going on the time lapse. So mounted these hoses to the heater box or evap unit. We've also mounted this bracket, put some studs on it. We have mounted the ECU on another bracket, and we've also put all these vent provisions in here. So this is where all the business end of this unit's going to do work. Floor, I think this is your actual panel vents, and then I don't know, maybe the front end here is defrost, something to that effect. But anyway, I am just following instructions, folks, and to be honest, it's fairly self-explanatory if you go through and take your time and do what they tell you. Some of the pictures, if I'm being honest, are a little small to get things figured out, like which direction these spring clips go to mount some of these vent provisions. But in all honesty, like if you just take your time, work with logic, you'll figure it out, which direction they go. You know, you got like a 50-50 shot as to putting them on there in the right fashion. I went on the wrong way initially, and I was like, geez, those aren't on there very tight. You flip them around and bang, they work as they should. So logic prevails, but yeah, I guess just take your time and follow these instructions. I can't help but think to myself that a lot of this just reminds me of being a kid and building like an intense Lego unit. It all fits together as it should, especially if you follow the instructions. So that's kind of where we're currently at, folks. Now we are, I believe, moving into the cab again. We're doing some firewall stuff.
Stop!
Alright guys, I'm not gonna lie to you. That was a bit of a pain in the ass. Both putting that firewall plate in. Now some of that is due to my situation. I've got air lines ran for my air ride. I mean, it is kind of congested in there. I actually almost considered pulling my upper intake, and because it's got to come off at some point for the Kenne Bell, right? But I didn't. I squeaked it in, and I got those 2 top bolts in there, which is all that the instructions are telling us to put in so far. And then this guy down here, so this is for the drain of this unit. I mean, there's really no good way to set that plate in there, the block off plate that blocks the hole, and hold it. I mean, the RTV I put in there definitely helps, but then you got to try to tighten those 2 bolts down. I mean, I was, holding it with my screwdriver with a 10 mil, and then I had my ratchet on a 10 mil, and every time you go to tighten it, I mean, the whole thing shifts. You're kind of jacking up your RTV. Anyway, we ended up getting it, but a little bit of a dick around. I guess maybe having somebody to help you on the other end, maybe stuff their finger in that hole and keep it from clocking on you. There's that new plate up top there where heater hoses used to go. Still got to figure out how that's all going to run, but and then down below there you can see where that block off plate for the drain now currently is. So spits are out right by my long tube. Might have to do some messing around there to make sure that everything fits correctly and doesn't burn, but that is, I guess, pretty much all our holes blocked off now.
That was something.
So the heater box is in, but that was not for the faint of heart. Heater boxes, I guess, well, the OEM ones aren't bad because there's only like 3 bolts, right? Here, and then 1 down through the bottom. This was a little bit of a different animal because, you're stabbing lines through a tight rubber boot, trying to get things to line up absolutely perfect. And actually, I will say this, there was not a lot of direction as far as where you wanted, well, for example, that one hose that you guys seen hanging in here before the heater box was even in. I had it down low initially, just kind of hanging down on the floorboards here. Well, it turns out that's not where it needs to be at all. And there was no mention of that. So heater box came back out, routed it around over through here, and now it's kind of up here where it needs to be. It's one of those things that if you know it, or you knew it, you do it every time, but not knowing, you're like, well, whatever. It tells me to throw the heater box in, let's just throw it in. Some other stuff too, like this plug, it was down on the floorboards as well, right? And I'm like, oh, damn, that's got to come up here. You don't want it like draped around underneath here. So little lessons learned that the instructions didn't really point out for me, but now I know. So I'll point them out for you guys, right? Anyway, make sure this great big line comes across the top before you throw your heater box in. Run your cable, your whatever, computer ECU cord over the top. What else? Oh, the bottom bolt that way back in the instructions, they tell you to drill the hole out. This is kind of where the drain is down here. So the hole that goes through the firewall is your bottom bolt for your OEM heater box. Well, it's also the bottom bolt for this new vintage air heater box. You got to run a bolt through from the engine compartment firewall in to the heater box. That guy is very tricky to line up. Didn't read the instruction that was following it, just telling you to run a bolt through from the firewall. And it's like the next step was, hey, if you have troubles running this bolt through, just run a bolt and a nut and call it a day. I'm like, oh, geez. Anyway, I did get the bolt through. I'll show you from the firewall side. But I was like running a punch through and trying to line things up. A little difficult to see here, but that guy right there. So the whole box is bolted in there exactly how Vintage Air wants it to be. And then obviously we got all our wiring stabbed through here. So yeah, I mean, again, not the end of the world, but this is by no means a Sunday afternoon install, folks. You're gonna need some time set aside if you want to do this, but I'll tell you more about that. I'll give you my final thoughts at the end of the video.
Okay, next steps are plumbing of lines. If you're following this video as a chronological unfolding of how the instructions are written, this is where it might get a little bit muddy, or I'm going to be doing things a little bit different. I will explain. So the instructions are telling me to run my main lines to compressor, so on and so forth. And interestingly enough, the instructions don't even tell you to mount the compressor. It just starts referencing, yep, put your line on your compressor. I'm like, okay, I don't know. Maybe I missed something back there, but I have been following step by step. So anyway, I guess they just assume that you've thrown your compressor in here at whatever point in time, and now you can start attaching all your lines. Well, I mean, I think probably the vast majority of you that are going to watch this know that all of this upper stuff's coming off my motor, right? So we're going with that Kenne Bell blower. I don't want to get too busy up in this region before that big old heavy pig is set in place. So I think I'm going to just earmark this page of the instructions and leave these lines out of the mix for now. Oh, and one more thing I want to point out. I mentioned earlier that as per the instructions, you got to cut out your like firewall insulation, your firewall blanket. I didn't cut it or trim it one single spot, and everything worked out just fine. I mean, maybe it was a little tighter going in there with the heater box, but I'd rather be a little tighter and not have to cut that OEM blanket. So make sure you make note of that before you bail into carving yours up, especially if you got a nice one that's still original to the car. Well, folks, one thing led to another, and the lid finally had to come off. I've been working around it and essentially just leaving that on there so I don't have to bother like worrying about anything falling down in my intake. And obviously I'm going to tape it up, but I just thought the longer it can stay on there, the better. And here we are. So I thought I'd just give you a quick little look under the lid. For as clean as I try to keep things under here, there's just no avoiding garbage getting down and hanging out on your lower intake there, right? But everything looks good. I'm super happy with how things look down the intake runners. This is a T-Moss ported lower Cobra intake. So you can kind of see some of his fancy work in there. And yeah, she's been on here since 2017. Well, the intake itself went on this car, geez, in like 99 or 2000. And then it came off in 2017, went down to Mr. Moss there. He ported it, and then it went back on after I re-ringed and re-bearinged and honed on my driveway this block. So anyway, I've got enough videos talking about all that stuff. But anyway, yeah, I am working on putting this heater control valve together, and I'm actually farting around here. I'll talk to you guys maybe a little bit more about this later, but this is kind of a poor man's way of tidying up your hoses so they don't just look like black rubber hoses. They kind of look like the braided AN style. I'm using some braided sleeving and then just some 3-to-1 heat shrink tube. Kind of, I don't know, makes them look a little bit cooler rather than just a standard black hose. But I might take some time here and just go through and do my little wiring tidy up here. This is all from 2017. I want to get rid of a lot of this looming and go with that
more braided stuff. I think it looks a lot nicer. And we're going to bring that harness down. Anyway, do some farting around here. But I do need some more room to work with to mount this valve. This valve is going to live here on Vintage Air's heater box kind of firewall plate. And this thing's kind of bouncing into my main harness here, the passenger side harness. So anyway, that's kind of how this all unfolded, right? Figured to get the throttle body and everything out of the way, may as well pull the intake and give myself a little bit more room to work. So I think now's a pretty good time to start moving some of this wiring and figure out where it's all going to start to live. Maybe even relume some of it as I go. And then that will make mounting this guy make a little bit more sense. Okay guys, as promised, poor man's braided hose. So just taking a standard piece of heater hose that I'm going to use here. I'm going to slide this. This isn't split loom, it's whatever, fully circular, non-split. I kind of overshoot the mark. Then I take myself some 3-to-1 heat shrink, the heavy duty stuff. I'll maybe put some links to what I use down in the description if you're interested. Open up your heat shrink. Line her up on the end of your hose, like so. Hit her with the gun. You got to be careful with the heat gun because this nylon looming will melt. Trim your ends. Make sure you don't get any in your hose. Maybe hit it with some compressed air once you've done all your trimming so you don't get any junk in your line. And then if you want to be real fancy, take your little torch and just kind of nuke all your ends. There you go. All right. Fake braided line. I'm going to do the same for the other end and we'll get back to business. Right. Now, I'd be lying to you if I told you all I did was that heater exchange deal. So this project, quite honestly, should be called loose ends because I have loose ends everywhere. My God. I got the car jacked up. I got the wheel well liner out on the passenger side here because they haven't mentioned anything about running wires yet or wiring anything up, but I don't think I'm going to want those wires running through the engine bay area. So I'm going to tuck them. And yeah, I kind of started pulling apart my harness a little bit. Got rid of some of my smog pump solenoids. Not some, all of them. I just thought it'd be a little easier to work back here in the firewall area with all that stuff out of the way. And I'm going to have my car, well, when it goes in after the Kenne Bell for the tune, all that stuff's going to be whatever, deleted from the computer. So anyway, the project at hand here, this turned out quite well. I'll be honest with you, I was not sure about this whole diverter system. And move some of the main harness out of the way here so you can see, but this all tucks away quite nicely. So, but now with that said, I've also mentioned that I was going to, in theory, run my catch can in here. Hence the reason I left these studs in place and didn't run bolts. But as it turns out, this little solenoid valve goes in there and kind of takes up that real estate. So the catch can system, I guess, will have to move. Anyway, yeah, and these hoses turned out quite cool, right? Kind of a, I think I called them earlier, a poor man's braided line, just not a regular old rubber hose, right? A little bit better look. And I actually, well, I did the ones off my water pump and stuff too while I was at it. And I actually ran the Y block. Sorry, this has pretty much nothing to do with this air conditioning install, but if you guys have been following along at home with this whole unfolding of this project, you'd know that that was all part and parcel with my electric fan setup, which is still not in the car. Right, so the dash is all plumbed and ready for the vintage air piping. Now, couple things to note in here, ladies and gents. There was never any mention of removing this old OEM, this is like the mechanical vacuum operated selector between floor, defrost, panel, all that stuff. There was never any mention of this in the instructions. Like I've been following along every step. I went from heater control valve install, right? And then we go to dash louver adapter prep, and I'm reading through the instructions. They're like, remove the passenger side vent piece, right? Install this unit so their piping can go on it. More on this whole install in a second too. And then they're like, okay, now that that's done, reinstall it. I'm like, it won't reinstall. Like, it's going to bump up against all this stuff. So anyway, I could have missed something here, but I've checked the instructions a few times. All I know is I didn't see it in mine. So you do have to remove this thing. It's not the end of the world. It's like 3 screws, you know, like boom, boom, and whatever. There's one kind of up top here, but pull that out. That'll make your life a hell of a lot easier. And then go ahead and do their installation. Now, the other thing that Vintage Air tells you to do is bust out the silicone. Okay, and I was looking at this going, geez, I really don't want to be horsing around with RTV or whatever. And this whole, you know, HVAC system, it's pretty hokey. And these pieces, I mean, they're definitely not precision fit. They're tight, like the Vintage Air pieces do go on there, but you got pretty big gaps to fill. Actually, you could probably see one here. And now they do give you this foam stuff, which I'm here to tell you folks, I farted around trying to get the like sticky side or the paper off the sticky side. I don't know. Maybe someone's better than me. I can't get it off of there. So no foam. Anyway, I pretty much resulted to like duct tape, or in my case, this like Binford 9000 Gorilla Tape, which is like the best duct tape out there. It's tough as nails. So I've just taped all of these in, and I mean, hell, that's what the HVAC guys do, right, in houses. So anyway, I'm not too concerned with any of that. I guess worst case scenario, if something starts flapping, we got to pull the dash, but I really didn't want to RTV those things in there. So that's the route I've gone. I have not taped this guy on here yet. And the reason being is, well, I got to do some figuring here because I'm using Matthew Puzzi Tech Motion's vent gauge pods, and I'm going to have to plumb some wiring through mine. And it's not going to work very well back and through here, right? This used to work a lot easier in the OEM unit, but what I think I'll do is maybe just hole grommet, run my wires out here and here, and then I'll tape this guy on and we can, whatever, hook them all up, plumb them in. So that's the plan there. Actually, I wonder, do they tell you to silicone that one on there too? Maybe they don't. Geez, I'm not sure. Or maybe they just tell you to push it on there. Yeah. Anyway, oh no. No, it is. They want you to silicone that thing. So, geez, that's going to be tricky to remove if you ever got to pull your dash out. I don't know. I'm figuring this out as I go, folks. So anyway, yeah, I think we're on to wiring now officially. So we'll park the dash for now and move under the hood and in the cab.
Well, we are pretty much done. The compressor's not in and one of my lines is not in, but outside of that, like, we're wired. Oh, you know what? And I got to put like the control panel in the dash, but obviously that's going to happen once the dash is in. Now, I'm just going to bore you for a couple quick minutes just in case anybody's curious as to like how this whole wiring situation unfolded, and then I'll follow up with my final thoughts for you. So starting over at the firewall, the wiring comes out of the Vintage Air firewall plate, and then I've ran it down and through my shock tower, tucked it up and around. I've pulled the wheel well liner out of the passenger side, and then I've essentially ran it all the way over to the driver's side front corner behind the headlight. It runs along in behind the bumper here. In theory, you can't really see it. Okay. And ties up into the ground stud that I've been working off of here for the last few videos. And then the power wires I've tied into the power stud that I installed a couple videos ago as well. And then the only other wire that had to carry on from there is the compressor wire, compressor clutch wire, which, well, that's actually it hanging down there. But it's going to be ran through the harness and tied into the compressor here once the compressor is on the motor. But that is still off because the Kenne Bell instructions, the little bit that I have read them, there are some modifications that I need to make to this bracket in order for the Kenne Bell bracket, that guy right there, to work with it. So I haven't painted it because there needs to be like some die grinding done in here somewhere. And so that's the reason why the compressor is not on the car. And that final line is not in as well. Now, moving into the cab, there's a couple wires you need to tap into, which I went to great lengths in order not to cut them. I just backed them out of the plugs that Vintage Air's instructions tell you to, and you tie them into this violet kind of tan wire. So this is now, from what I understand of how this system works, this is now like your signal wire that turns your relay on, that's all tucked in over here. And because you actually end up pulling out the 30 amp fuse that powers, I think it's this brown orange wire, brown with an orange stripe. You pull the 30 amp fuse out of your fuse panel and you replace it with a 5 amp fuse. So yeah, like we're pretty much dialed in. Now, again, a lot needs to occur in here in order to tidy everything up and get it back on the dash frame. And then I do need to run my hoses to my vents, but I don't think that's a real rocket science endeavor. So that will be missed in the video as well. And then the joys of throwing my dash and most of my interior back in. Final thoughts. Well, I should maybe preface that and say almost final thoughts, because I'm sure everyone is curious as to how this thing blows. Is it cold? All those good things, but that will have to wait until I've got it charged and, you know, got the car running and stuff. So I will follow up with everyone in regards to that in a future video. But as far as the install is concerned, I would say that you should definitely know what you're doing, both mechanically and from a electronics perspective, like wiring, okay? It's definitely not a quick install. Now,
I'm hoping that by putting this video out, I'll maybe help folks navigate some of the scenarios that I found myself somewhat scratching my head throughout the instructions. I'm hoping that this video will help clarify some of that stuff. And there were things that I tweaked, right? I changed the way that they told me to, I didn't silicone my vents and things of that nature. So there were some changes, but like, I guess overall, maybe have a friend involved too. If you don't know what you're doing, somebody that does know what they're doing, an extra set of hands would be ideal in some situations when you're trying to line things up through the firewall and throw hoses on stuff. And as I was pushing, like the hoses coming through the firewall on me, like it would have been really nice to have a helping hand. I did get it all done myself, so it can be done, but an extra set of hands would help for sure. Definitely don't plan on banging this thing out in an afternoon or an evening. I would say set yourself a weekend aside to peel your interior out, install all the parts, and then put the interior back in. I mean, my interior is not even back in yet, right? I've still got a couple, 2-3 more hours ahead of me of putting my interior all back together. And like I said, still got to connect all the hoses. Still got to put on the compressor, which shouldn't take all that long, but you know, there's still some things I got to do. So it's a heavy lift. I wished I would have totaled up all of my hours. I'll tell you what though, like it's quite a few. So yeah, definitely make sure you set the time aside. But as far as the Vintage Air kit and quality, fit and finish and all that good stuff's concerned, it's mint, like literally mint. I'm hoping it performs, which I assume it should. I mean, it's got a Spall blower fan in it. Like, you know, there was no corners cut, so you get good quality stuff. And yeah, so from that perspective, unreal, right? I definitely got a lot more room for activities under the dash now that all the old vacuum and mechanically operated stuff. I said before, it's worth saying again though, like this heater box, the overall size of it is half the size of the OEM box. I mean, look at this thing. I still got it sitting here on the floor. Like it's huge. So yeah, I mean, would I recommend it without running it so far based on what I've seen? Yeah, for sure. If you've got a car that, like in my case, didn't have air conditioning before, you don't want to fart around finding a whole new old school heater box from a junker car or whatever, right? A scrap car. You want to just get all brand new stuff. I'm thinking that it's probably going to have brand new smells and not old musty smells like the OEM stuff does. And probably a way better blower. So, I mean, I think this thing will probably part your hair if you're sitting in the back seat. I think this is the route to go. So, yeah, there's my final thoughts, ladies and gents. I hope this video helps people decide on whether or not you want to run down this road. Again, if you don't have AC in your car or didn't come from the factory with AC in it, I see this as a no-brainer. Like it's slick, right? Or, you know, your AC's screwed, your heater box is done, maybe your heater core is going and, you know, you don't want to just replace the heater core. This would be a perfect time to throw one of these kits in. So anyway, I think you get the point. I think this kit is worth recommending. So anyway, I will follow up with everyone later, let you know how it performs. But I guess until then, this one's a wrap. So thanks everybody for watching. Hope this video helps. If you think it helps somebody else out there, please share it along. That's why I do these videos, to try and help the community and give back in any way, shape, or form that I can. So thanks for watching, guys. Take care. Bye for now.